The Anabolic Architects, decoding the 10 pillars of human hypertrophy. In the relentless theater of iron and sweat, the gym is merely the spark, the kitchen is the furnace where true strength is forged. We are not discussing simple sustenance, but the precise molecular engineering required to reconstruct the human form. This is a deep dive investigation into the bioavailability of power, stripping away marketing hype to reveal the raw, unadulterated fuel sources that dictate physical dominance. Prepare to overhaul your physiology with the definitive nutritional dossier, beginning with the undisputed king of lean tissue synthesis. 1. Chicken breast, the white gold of the anabolic industrial complex. To understand the hegemony of the chicken breast in the world of physical culture, one must first strip away the culinary prejudices that view it as a dry, flavorless necessity and instead view it through the lens of pure bioengineering. For the last half-century, the skinless, boneless chicken breast has served as the white gold of the fitness industry, the standard candle against which all other protein sources are measured. It is not merely a foodstuff, it is a cultural artifact, a symbol of discipline, and the primary fuel source for the modern hypertrophy machine. The rise of the chicken breast to the apex of the bodybuilding food pyramid is a complex narrative weaving together post-war agricultural industrialization, the demonization of dietary fats in the late 20th century, and the molecular specificities of human muscle protein synthesis. Biologically, the appeal of the chicken breast is rooted in its ruthless efficiency. We are looking at a macronutrient profile that is nearly architectural in its perfection for the gym-goer. A standard 100-gram serving yields approximately 31 grams of protein with a negligible fat content of around 3.6 grams depending on the trim. However, the raw numbers tell only a fraction of the story. The magic lies in the amino acid profile. Chicken breast is dense with essential amino acids, EAAs, specifically the branched-chain amino acids, BCAAs, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. Leucine in particular acts as the primary key in the ignition switch of the mTOR pathway, mechanistic target of rapamycin, the cellular signaling process that dictates muscle growth. When a lifter consumes chicken breast, they are not simply filling a caloric void, they are flooding the bloodstream with a precise ratio of substrates required to repair the microtears induced by heavy resistance training. Unlike plant sources, which often require complex combining to achieve a complete amino acid profile, or red meats, which carry a heavier caloric load via saturated fats, the chicken breast offers a clean injection of anabolic material. It is the closest nature comes to a pharmaceutical-grade protein isolate in solid food form. The historical trajectory of this avian dominance is a fascinating study in economics and marketing. Prior to the 1950s, chicken was a luxury, often reserved for Sunday dinners, and the bird of choice was a smaller, gamier creature. The revolution began with the Chicken of Tomorrow contests held in the United States between 1945 and 1948, sponsored by the A&P supermarket chain. These contests encouraged breeders to genetically select for birds with larger breasts and thicker thighs, birds that grew faster on less feed. This genetic tinkering gave rise to the modern broiler, specifically the Cornish cross, a bird engineered for maximum meat yield. This agricultural shift coincided perfectly with the lipid hypothesis of the 1970s and 80s, spearheaded by figures like Ansel Keys, which posited somewhat controversially in hindsight that saturated fat was the primary driver of heart disease. As red meat became the villain of the American dinner plate, the lean white meat of the chicken breast ascended to the throne of health. Bodybuilders, always at the vanguard of extreme nutritional experimentation, adopted this paradigm with religious fervor. The chicken, broccoli, and brown rice trifecta became the monastic vow of the physique athlete, a meal that prioritized function entirely over form or pleasure. Culturally, the chicken breast represents the stoicism of the gym-goer. There is a shared psychological experience among bodybuilders involving the consumption of dry, rubbery chicken out of Tupperware containers in parking lots, office break rooms, and locker rooms. This ritual is a rite of passage. It signifies a rejection of food as entertainment and an acceptance of food as fuel. However, the culinary tragedy of the dry chicken breast is a matter of user error rather than intrinsic flaw. From a molecular gastronomy perspective,
the muscle fibers of the breast are lean and lack the lubricating collagen found in tougher cuts like the thigh or shoulder. When heated beyond 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 degrees Celsius, the protein structures tighten aggressively, wringing out moisture like a sponge. The savvy nutritional architect utilizes methods like brining, submerging the meat in a saline solution to denature the proteins and trap water molecules, or sous vide cooking, which allows for precise temperature control, keeping the meat safe but texturally sublime. The bioavailability of the protein is also modulated by preparation. Overcooking can render amino acids less digestible, while undercooking poses bacterial risks. Thus, the preparation of chicken breast is a delicate balance between safety and maximum nutrient absorption. The economic implications of chicken breast consumption are staggering. It remains one of the most cost-effective sources of high-quality protein on the planet. For the aspiring bodybuilder on a budget, the price per gram of protein in chicken breast is often half that of lean beef or whey isolate. This economic accessibility accessibility has democratized bodybuilding, allowing it to move from a niche subculture in Venice Beach to a global phenomenon. However, this massive scale of production brings with it ethical and environmental questions that the modern investigative researcher cannot ignore. The intensive farming practices required to keep chicken cheap involve antibiotic usage and high-density confinement, raising concerns about antibiotic resistance and animal welfare. The organic and pasture-raised movements have emerged as a counterculture within the fitness world, with proponents arguing that the stress levels and diet of the bird affect the micronutrient quality of the meat. There is emerging data suggesting that pasture-raised chicken may have higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids and vitamin E, adding another layer of complexity to the simple act of buying groceries. Looking toward the future, the reign of the chicken breast faces a potential disruption from the realm of biotechnology. Lab-grown meat or cultivated meat is currently focusing heavily on chicken products. The ability to grow pure muscle tissue in a bioreactor without the need for a sentient nervous system or the environmental overhead of a factory farm could revolutionize the protein intake of the future athlete. Imagine a chicken breast engineered to have even higher leucine content.
Or infused with creatine during the growth phase. Until that sci-fi reality stabilizes, however, the organic, farm-raised chicken breast remains the undisputed heavyweight champion of lean muscle synthesis. It is the foundational block upon which millions of pounds of human muscle have been built, a testament to the power of targeted nutrition. It is the unglamorous, reliable, and scientifically validated workhorse of the hypertrophy world. Eggs, the resurrection of the perfect protein. If chicken breast is the workhorse of the anabolic diet, the egg is its genesis, the alpha point of nutritional perfection. For decades, the egg existed in a purgatory of medical misunderstanding, vilified by a scientific community that conflated dietary cholesterol with serum cholesterol. Today, following an exhaustive reevaluation of lipidology and nutritional epidemiology, the egg has been exonerated and restored to its rightful place as the gold standard of protein quality. In the investigative dossier of muscle-building foods, the egg is unique. It is a self-contained life support system, a biological capsule designed by evolution to turn a single cell into a living, breathing organism. For the gym goer, this means consuming a packet of nutrients so dense and bioavailable that it sets the benchmark for all other foods. To comprehend the value of the egg, one must understand the concept of biological value, BV. This is a scale used to measure the proportion of protein that is absorbed and incorporated into the proteins of the consumer's body. For decades, the whole egg sat at the top of this scale with a value of 100, serving as the reference point against which beef, whey, and soy were judged. The protein in eggs is complete in the strictest sense, containing all 9 essential amino acids in ratios that mirror the requirements of human physiology almost perfectly. But the egg is a tale of two cities, the white albumin and the yolk. During the fat-phobic era of the 1980s and 90s, bodybuilders engaged in the mass discarding of yolks, consuming gallons of pasteurized egg whites in a misguided attempt to avoid cholesterol. This was a nutritional tragedy. While the white contains the bulk of the protein and magnesium, the yolk is the nutritional powerhouse, containing 100% of the egg's fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, as well as essential fatty acids and cholesterol. The cholesterol controversy warrants a deep investigative dive.
The human body produces cholesterol endogenously because it is a vital substance. It is the precursor to steroid hormones, including testosterone. The logic that eating cholesterol directly translates to clogged arteries has been largely dismantled for the general population. Current research suggests that for the majority of people, hyperresponders excluded, dietary cholesterol has a negligible impact on blood cholesterol levels. In fact, the cholesterol in egg yolks may aid in the structural integrity of muscle cell membranes. Furthermore, the yolk is rich in choline, a nutrient critical for brain function, and more importantly for the athlete, neuromuscular signal transmission. Stronger neural drive translates to heavier lifts, which translates to greater muscle growth. By tossing the yolk, gym goers were throwing away the very precursors needed for testosterone production and optimal nervous system performance. The cultural history of the egg in bodybuilding is iconic, perhaps best visualized by the cinematic image of Rocky Balboa cracking raw eggs into a glass and drinking them at dawn. This scene, etched into the collective consciousness, popularized the idea of the raw egg as the ultimate tough guy fuel. However, from a digestive chemistry standpoint, Rocky was mistaken. Detailed studies on protein absorption rates show that the protein in cooked eggs is approximately 91% bioavailable, whereas the protein in raw eggs is only about 50% bioavailable. Heat is required to denature the protein inhibitors, specifically trypsin inhibitors, found in the raw egg white, unlocking the amino acids for the body to use. Furthermore, the risk of salmonella, while statistically low in pasteurized modern eggs, remains a variable that the calculated athlete need not risk. The science dictates that the egg should be cooked, boiled, poached, or scrambled to unlock its full anabolic potential. Beyond the macros, the egg serves as a critical delivery system for vitamin D, a hormone-like vitamin that is inextricably linked to muscle function and bone health. Deficiency in vitamin D is rampant in the modern world, and it is associated with muscle weakness and atrophy. Eggs are one of the few natural food sources of this compound. When we analyze the lipid profile of the egg, we also find a significant amount of omega-3 fatty acids, particularly in eggs sourced from hens fed a diet rich in flaxseed or fish oil.
These designer eggs represent a leap forward in functional food, allowing the athlete to combat systemic inflammation, the enemy of recovery, simply by choosing a specific carton at the grocery store.
the sourcing of eggs has become a complex topic involving ethics, biochemistry, and marketing. The labels cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised are not merely buzzwords, they denote drastically different nutritional profiles. Research indicates that hens allowed to forage in pastures, eating bugs, grass, and a natural diet, produce eggs with superior micronutrient densities, higher vitamin E, higher beta-carotene, evident in the deep, vibrant orange color of the yolk, and better omega-3 to omega-6 ratios. The pale yellow yolk of the industrial, grain-fed factory farm hen is a visual indicator of a nutritionally inferior product. For the high-end bodybuilder, the investment in pasture-raised eggs is an investment in higher quality raw materials for tissue reconstruction. The versatility of the egg also contributes to its high ranking. In a lifestyle defined by rigid meal timing and preparation fatigue, the egg is the ultimate convenience food. Hard-boiled eggs are the original portable protein snack, protected by their own biodegradable packaging. They can be prepared in bulk, stored easily, and consumed without utensils. This utility, combined with their low cost relative to other animal proteins, makes them indispensable. They act as a binder in protein pancakes, a topper for avocado toast, or a standalone meal. There is also a philosophical dimension to the consumption of eggs. In many cultures, the egg represents potential energy and new life. For the bodybuilder, who is essentially in a constant cycle of breaking down the self and rebuilding it stronger, the egg is a poetic fuel. It provides the literal building blocks of life to facilitate the rebirth of muscle tissue. The fear-mongering of the past has dissipated, replaced by a nuanced understanding of lipid profiles and hormonal precursors. We now know that the saturated fat in eggs is not the enemy, but a necessary component for the production of anabolic hormones. The egg has weathered the storm of bad science to emerge once again as a superfood. It is the perfect companion to the chicken breast, where one provides the sheer volume of lean protein, the other provides the hormonal support and micronutrient density required to utilize that protein. Together,
They form the bedrock of the muscle-building diet, a synergy of white and yolk, lean and lipid that drives human performance to its outer limits.
3. Salmon, the anti-inflammatory hydraulic of modern recovery. If the chicken breast is the brick and mortar of muscle construction, salmon is the specialized high-tech sealant that ensures the structure withstands the weathering of extreme stress. In the grand investigation of anabolic nutrition, salmon occupies a tier of its own, transcending the simple category of protein source to become a functional pharmaceutical agent. We are moving away from the terrestrial limitations of poultry and entering the marine environment, where the cold, dark pressures of the ocean have engineered a biological profile perfectly suited to the inflammatory realities of the gym goer. The consumption of salmon is not merely about nitrogen retention, it is a tactical strike against the systemic inflammation that plagues the heavy lifter. It represents the sophisticated intersection of lipidology and hypertrophy, a food source that manages the body's internal fire while fueling its growth. To understand the primacy of salmon, one must first understand the enemy of the bodybuilder, inflammation. While acute inflammation is a necessary signal for muscle repair, chronic systemic inflammation is catabolic. It eats away at tissue, hinders recovery, and disrupts hormonal signaling. This is where the specific lipid profile of salmon becomes the most valuable tool in the athlete's arsenal. Salmon is the premier delivery system for the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, eicosapentaenoic acid EPA and docosapentaenoic acid DHA. Unlike their plant-based cousin, alpha-linolenic acid ALA, found in flax and walnuts, which requires an inefficient conversion process within the human body, EPA and DHA are bioavailable immediately upon ingestion. They integrate themselves into the lipid bilayer of the muscle cell membrane, increasing fluidity and sensitivity. This is a critical mechanical advantage. A more fluid cell membrane allows for more efficient transport of nutrients like glucose and amino acids into the cell. Essentially, the fats in salmon sensitize the islotiny anabolic signal of insulin, making every gram of carbohydrate and protein consumed alongside it more effective. The distinction between wild-caught and farm salmon is the defining controversy of the century, a debate that encompasses nutritional biochemistry, environmental ethics, and economics. Wild salmon such as sockeye, coho, or chinook spend their lives navigating the open ocean and fighting upstream currents. This vigorous physical existence results in a leaner fish with a robust natural muscular structure and a nutrient profile derived from a diverse diet of krill, plankton, and smaller fish. This diet is responsible for the deep, vibrant red hue of wild salmon flesh, a color provided by astaxanthin. Astaxanthin is a potent carotenoid and antioxidant, often called the king of carotenoids, that has been shown to improve endurance and reduce exercise-induced muscle damage. When an athlete consumes wild salmon, they are ingesting significant biological data from the ocean's food web, including this critical antioxidant that protects the mitochondria during intense exertion. Conversely, the farmed salmon industry, or aquaculture, presents a more complex variable. Farmed Atlantic salmon are raised in net pens, often sedentary, and fed a pelletized diet that can include soy, corn, and ground fish meal. Consequently, farmed salmon is higher in total fat, sometimes double that of wild varieties, but the quality of that fat is the subject of intense scrutiny. While still high in omega-3s, farmed salmon can also contain higher levels of omega-6 fatty acids due to the vegetable oils in their feed. In the modern Western diet, the ratio of omega-6 pro-inflammatory to omega-3 anti-inflammatory is already skewed dangerously high. The purist bodybuilder seeking to minimize inflammation often views the farmed variant with skepticism, opting for the leaner, astaxanthin-rich wild catch despite the steeper price point. Furthermore, concerns regarding polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, and other persistent organic pollutants in farmed fish fat stores have led many health authorities to recommend limiting consumption, whereas wild Alaskan salmon remains one of the cleanest proteins on Earth. From a culinary perspective, salmon challenges the food as fuel mentality by demanding respect in preparation. The structure of fish protein is delicate. The myotomes, muscle blocks, are separated by thin connective tissue that dissolves quickly under heat. Overcooking salmon destroys the very lipids the athlete is seeking to preserve. When omega-3 fatty acids are subjected to high heat, they can oxidize, turning a health-promoting molecule into a potentially harmful free radical. Thus, the preparation of salmon is a lesson in temperature control. Gentle poaching, low-temperature baking, or raw consumption, sashimi, preserves the integrity of the fatty acids and the astaxanthin. This elevates the meal from a chore to a ritual. The texture of properly cooked salmon, flaking effortlessly, rich and oily, provides a level of satiety that chicken or whitefish cannot match, triggering the release of satiety hormones like cholecystokinin, which helps regulate appetite during cutting phases. The cultural trajectory of salmon is also worth noting. For centuries, it was the subsistence food of indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest and the coastal Atlantic, revered as a sacred gift. In the 19th century, during the industrial canning boom, it became a working-class staple. It wasn't until the late 20th century cardiovascular revolution, which recognized the French paradox and the benefits of the Mediterranean diet, that salmon was elevated to superfood status. Today, it sits on the menu of every high-end restaurant and in the meal prep containers of every elite physique athlete. It bridges the gap between the gourmet and the functional. Looking to the future, the sustainability of salmon consumption is the pressing variable. Wild stocks are under immense pressure from climate change, overfishing, and habitat destruction. This has given rise to the next frontier in food technology, genetically modified GM salmon. The aqua abdigent salmon, engineered with a growth hormone gene from Chinook salmon and a promoter sequence from the ocean pout, grows to market size in half the time of a conventional Atlantic salmon. While currently approved and sold, it faces significant pushback from consumers and environmental groups wary of frankenfish. For the bodybuilder, the question becomes one of equivalence. Does the GM salmon offer the same micronutrient density? As land-based aquaculture systems, massive tanks that grow salmon inland away from ocean parasites and pollution, become more prevalent, we may see a cleaner farmed salmon that rivals the wild catch in purity, if not in the romanticism of the catch. Until then, the wild-caught salmon remains the platinum standard, a nutrient-dense torpedo of recovery that repairs the damage of the iron game with the healing power of the sea. Lean beef, the primal anchor of myofibrillar density. If salmon is the sophisticated anti-inflammatory agent of the modern age, lean beef is the ancient primal sledgehammer of the iron game. It is the food of the golden era. The fuel that built the physiques of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Franco Columbu, and the mythical figures of the 1970s Venice beach scene. While it has weathered storms of epidemiological criticism and environmental debate, lean beef remains an immovable object in the nutritional landscape of bodybuilding for one simple reason. It contains a synergistic matrix of anabolic compounds that cannot be replicated by white meat or plant sources alone. We are investigating here the red meat phenomenon, specifically the lean cuts like sirloin, flank, and 90-10 ground beef, as the primary driver of strength, aggression, and hormonal density. The biochemical argument for beef begins with creatine. While the supplement industry has made creatine monohydrate a household name, beef is the original natural vessel for this compound. Creatine is essential for the recycling of adenosine triphosphate, ATP, the energy currency of the cell during high-intensity, short-duration exertion. When a lifter pushes a heavy barbell, they are depleting ATP stores. Creatine phosphate donates a phosphate molecule to regenerate ATP, allowing for that extra rep or that heavier lift. Beef provides a natural, highly bioavailable source of creatine, along with carnitine, which aids in fat metabolism. For the natural athlete who is not relying on exogenous hormones, the naturally occurring creatine in beef provides a tangible performance edge that chicken simply does not possess. Beyond energetics, beef is the undisputed king of minerals, specifically iron and zinc. The iron found in beef is heme iron, a form bound to hemoglobin and myoglobin, which is absorbed by the human body at a rate significantly higher than non-heme iron found in spinach or lentils. For the hard-training athlete, iron status is critical. It dictates the oxygen-carrying capacity of the blood. Low iron levels mean less oxygen to working muscles, resulting in premature fatigue and lethargy. Zinc, arguably even more critical for the male lifter, is a requisite mineral for the production of testosterone and the maturation of sperm. Beef is one of the densest sources of dietary zinc. In an era where testosterone levels in men are statistically declining, the consumption of beef acts as a nutritional safeguard, providing the raw materials the endocrine system requires to maintain an anabolic environment. The fat content of beef is where the nuance of the lean designation becomes critical. In the culinary world, Marbling, the intramuscular fat that makes a Wagyu steak melt in your mouth, is prized. In the bodybuilding world, this fat is a caloric liability. However, the complete removal of saturated fat from the diet, a practice common in the 90s, has been shown to be counterproductive for hormone production. Cholesterol and saturated fat are the structural precursors to steroid hormones. A moderate intake of saturated fat, derived from lean cuts of beef, supports testicular function and cell membrane integrity. The goal is not to eat a ribeye dripping in grease, but to consume a top sirloin that offers a high protein-to-fat ratio while still providing enough essential lipids to keep the hormonal machinery greased. This balance is what makes lean beef a distinct nutritional category from red meat in the general sense. The grass-fed versus grain-fed dichotomy is as prevalent here as it is with salmon. Conventional grain-fed beef is finished on corn and soy to bulk up the animal quickly, resulting in a milder flavor and higher total fat content. Grass-fed beef, raised on pasture for the entirety of its life, presents a radically different biochemical profile. It is leaner, often tougher, and gamier, but it contains significantly higher levels of conjugated linoleic acid, CLA. CLA is a fatty acid that has demonstrated potential in clinical settings for reducing body fat and increasing lean mass, though the effect sizes vary. Furthermore, grass-fed beef contains up to 5 times as much omega-3 as grain-fed beef, improving the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. For the investigative researcher, the grass-fed cow represents a more harmonious link in the food chain, converting solar energy, grass, directly into protein, rather than filtering it through the industrial grain complex. Culturally, the consumption of red meat taps into a visceral, almost psychological layer of the human experience. There is the carnivore movement, a radical subculture that has gained traction in recent years, advocating for an all-meat diet. Proponents argue that the elimination of plant toxins and fiber resolves autoimmune issues and maximizes nutrient absorption. While controversial and lacking long-term longitudinal data, the resurgence of this primal way of eating highlights the deep-seated belief in the power of beef. Psychologically, many lifters report a feeling of increased satiety and drive after consuming red meat,
a phenomenon that may be linked to the tyrosine and phenylalanine content, precursors to dopamine and norepinephrine, or simply the placebo effect of consuming the apex food of the hunter-gatherer. However, the shadow of environmental impact looms large over the beef industry. Cattle farming is a resource-intensive endeavor, requiring vast amounts of water and land and generating methane, a potent greenhouse gas. This has placed the beef-eating bodybuilder in the crosshairs of the sustainability debate. The industry is responding with the concept of regenerative agriculture, a farming method where grazing cattle are used to sequester carbon into the soil, theoretically making the beef carbon neutral or even carbon negative. This holistic approach attempts to reconcile the nutritional necessity of beef with the ecological demands of the planet. Looking forward, technology is attempting to disrupt the slaughterhouse. Lab-grown beef, cultivated from bovine stem cells, is no longer science fiction. It is a burgeoning industry. We are on the precipice of seeing cruelty-free steaks printed in 3D structures that mimic the texture of muscle fibers. If science can replicate the heme iron, the creatine, and the amino acid profile of beef without the cow, it will fundamentally alter the landscape of sports nutrition. But until that technology is scalable and affordable, the cow remains the most efficient bioreactor for turning grass into the dense, heme-rich muscle tissue that humans have prized for millennia. Lean beef is the heavy artillery of the diet. It is not an everyday food for everyone, but for the gym goer seeking to break plateaus, increase strength, and maximize hormonal health, it remains an irreplaceable component of the anabolic protocol. It connects the modern lifter to the ancestral hunter, a blood and iron link that transcends the simple mathematics of calories and macros.
5. Tuna, the utilitarian canister of pure isolate. In the vast, glossy landscape of nutritional marketing, where supplements are sold in neon-colored jars with aggressive typography, the humble can of tuna stands as a monument to stoic utilitarian efficiency. It is the tactical ration of the fitness world, a cylinder of preserved muscle tissue that has served as the backbone of cutting diets for over half a century. When we investigate the role of tuna in the bodybuilder's dossier, we are stripping away the concept of cuisine entirely and entering the realm of pure nutrient delivery. Tuna is not eaten for pleasure by the serious athlete. It is deployed. It is a biological weapon used to strip body fat while preserving lean tissue, a foodstuff that offers perhaps the highest protein-to-calorie ratio of any naturally occurring solid food. To understand the hegemony of tuna, one must look past its mundane packaging and appreciate the marine biology, the industrial processing, and the sheer metabolic utility that makes it the poor man's protein isolate. The biological profile of the tuna fish is evolutionary engineering at its finest. Unlike many fish species that are sedentary or ambush predators, tuna are pelagic cruisers, forced to swim constantly to ventilate their gills. This perpetual motion requires a musculature that is incredibly dense and highly oxygenated. When we consume tuna, specifically the white meat of the albacore or the light meat of the skipjack, we are consuming myoglobin-rich fast-twitch and slow-twitch fibers that have been honed by the relentless currents of the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. A standard can of water-packed tuna can deliver 20 to 25 grams of high-quality protein with less than 1 gram of fat and 0 carbohydrates. This macronutrient profile is essentially an anomaly in nature. Almost every other protein source comes attached to a tax of either fat, as in beef or eggs, or carbohydrates, as in beans or lentils. Tuna is the exception. It is the cleanest slate available to the nutritional architect, allowing for the precise manipulation of macros without any caloric collateral damage. The history of tuna and bodybuilding is legendary, bordering on the grotesque. In the golden era and continuing into the mass monster era of the 1990s, the tuna shake became a rite of passage for the desperate. This grim concoction involved blending a can of tuna with water or orange juice to create a chuggable slurry.
Bypassing the need to chew dry meat, while visually and gustatorily repellent, the logic was sound: rapid ingestion of amino acids. This speaks to the cultural identity of tuna within the gym community. It is the fuel of the ascetic. The sound of a can opener piercing the tin lid is the auditory signal of a diet that prioritizes results over comfort. It represents the grind, the willingness to endure monotony for the sake of the physique. However, the investigation into tuna cannot ignore the metallic elephant in the room: mercury. The subject of methylmercury bioaccumulation is the single greatest controversy surrounding this food source. Methylmercury is a neurotoxin that accumulates in the aquatic food web. It starts with algae, is eaten by krill, then by small fish, and finally by apex predators like tuna. Because tuna live long lives and grow to massive sizes, they act as living reservoirs for this heavy metal. The fear of mercury poisoning has led many athletes to curb their consumption. However, a deep dive into the biochemistry reveals a protective mechanism often overlooked by alarmist headlines: selenium. Tuna is incredibly rich in selenium, a trace mineral that has a high binding affinity for mercury. When selenium binds to mercury, it forms a biologically inert complex, mercury selenide, effectively neutralizing the heavy metal and preventing it from binding to brain tissue. The Selenium Health Benefit Value, HBV, is a metric used to determine if a fish is safe. As long as the fish contains more selenium than mercury on a molar basis, the risk is significantly mitigated. Most commercial tuna species, particularly skipjack, usually labeled as chunk light, possess a positive selenium balance. Albacore, solid white, being a larger fish, carries a higher mercury load and requires more calculated glutamation. The processing of canned tuna is another layer of the story that demands scrutiny. The journey from the ocean to the pantry is an industrial marvel. The fish are flash frozen on the vessel to preserve freshness, a critical step known as the cold chain. Once at the cannery, they are thawed and pre-cooked in steam ovens. This initial cooking denatures the proteins and allows the workers to separate the loins from the skin and bones. The loins are then canned and cooked a second time, retort cooking, to sterilize the contents. This double cooking process is what gives canned tuna its distinct dry texture compared to a fresh tuna steak. Nutritional purists often debate the merits of water-packed versus oil-packed. While oil-packed tuna sounds more palatable, the investigation reveals a caloric trap. The oil used is typically cheap soybean or vegetable oil, high in omega-6 fatty acids, which can disrupt the inflammatory balance the athlete is trying to manage. Furthermore, when one drains the oil, they inevitably wash away some of the hydrophobic nutrients. Water-packed tuna retains the integrity of the pure protein ethos. Economically, tuna acts as the great democratizer of bodybuilding. The cost per gram of protein is rivaled only by eggs and dried lentils. This accessibility allows the college student, the amateur lifter, and the blue-collar worker to hit their macronutrient targets without the budget of a sponsored professional. It is the everyman's anabolic steroid, legal, cheap, and effective. Yet this cheapness comes at an environmental cost. The global appetite for tuna has placed immense strain on ocean stocks. The bluefin tuna, the prized giant of the sea, is critically endangered and generally avoided by ethical consumers. The industry has pivoted to skipjack and yellowfin, species with faster reproductive cycles. The pull and line caught label has emerged as the gold standard for the environmentally conscious bodybuilder, ensuring that the fish were caught individually rather than by massive purse seine nets that result in high levels of bycatch, including dolphins and turtles. The modern athlete is increasingly aware that their muscle-building habits have a global footprint, leading to a rise in the consumption of sustainably certified brands. Looking to the future, the dominance of wild-caught tuna faces an existential threat from the laboratory. The rise of cellular agriculture, growing fish meat from stem cells and bioreactors, is targeting tuna as a primary candidate. Companies like Blue Nalu are racing to produce cell culture tuna that is free from mercury, microplastics, and the ethical baggage of industrial fishing.
Imagine a future where a bodybuilder can eat raw bluefin tuna belly grown in a sterile facility with a customized fat profile and zero environmental impact. Until that sci-fi reality becomes a grocery store staple, the gym goer must navigate the current landscape with nuance, choosing skipjack for daily consumption to minimize mercury, opting for water packed to minimize calories, and respecting the can as a vessel of pure, unadulterated power. Tuna remains the reliable, shelf-stable anchor of the high-protein diet, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most effective tools are the most basic. 6. Greek yogurt, the fermented matrix of slow-release casein. If tuna is the utilitarian iron of the diet, Greek yogurt is the velvet hammer. It represents a paradigm shift in the dairy aisle, a transformation of a product once considered a sugary dessert into a functional superfood that rivals chicken breast in protein density. The rise of Greek yogurt in the early 21st century is one of the most significant disruptive events in the history of the modern grocery industry, often referred to as the Chobani effect. But for the investigative researcher, the story is not about marketing. It is about the physics of filtration and the biochemistry of fermentation. Greek yogurt is not merely thick yogurt. It is a concentrated protein delivery system that exploits the unique properties of milk proteins to support sustained anabolism, particularly during the critical window of sleep. To understand why Greek yogurt is superior to traditional yogurt for the gym goer, one must understand the manufacturing process known as straining. Traditional yogurt is made by fermenting milk with specific bacterial cultures, Lactobacillus bulgaricus and Streptococcus thermophilus. This process converts lactose, milk sugar, into lactic acid, thickening the milk and giving it a tangy taste. Greek yogurt takes this product and subjects it to centrifugation, or filtration through cloth bags. This step removes the whey, the liquid yellowy serum that contains much of the lactose and sugar. What remains is the semi-solid curds, dominated by casein protein. By removing the water and whey, the manufacturer effectively doubles or triples the protein content per volume. A standard cup of traditional yogurt might possess 6 grams of protein. The same volume of Greek yogurt boasts 18 to 20 grams. This is mechanical concentration at an industrial scale. The specific protein found in Greek yogurt, casein, is the hero of this narrative. Unlike whey protein, which is rapidly absorbed and spikes amino acid levels in the blood, ideal for post-workout, casein is micellar. When it hits the acidic environment of the human stomach, casein coagulates, forming a gel or a clot. This clot is digested slowly, trickling amino acids into the bloodstream over a period of 5 to 7 hours. This makes Greek yogurt the ultimate anti-catabolic agent. Bodybuilders have long feared the fasting window of sleep, where the body might turn to muscle tissue for fuel. Consuming a bowl of Greek yogurt before bed provides a steady IV drip of leucine and other amino acids throughout the night, keeping the body in a state of positive nitrogen balance while the athlete dreams. It is the biological equivalent of a time-release capsule. But the investigation goes deeper than just protein kinetics. We must look at the microbiome. The modern understanding of hypertrophy, muscle growth, is expanding to include the gut-muscle axis. We now know that the efficiency of nutrient absorption is dictated by the health of the intestinal lining. You are not just what you eat, you are what you absorb. Greek yogurt is a symbiotic food. It often contains both probiotics, live beneficial bacteria, and the substrates they feed on. These bacteria aid in the breakdown of food, the synthesis of B vitamins, and the regulation of systemic inflammation. A bodybuilder with a compromised gut from stress or poor diet will fail to utilize the massive amount of calories they consume. Greek yogurt acts as the peacekeeper of the gastrointestinal tract, ensuring that the machinery of digestion is functioning at peak efficiency. The texture and culinary versatility of Greek yogurt also play a massive psychological role in adherence to a bodybuilding diet. One of the primary reasons diets fail is palate fatigue, the boredom of eating dry, salty, savory foods like chicken and rice. Greek yogurt offers a creamy, tart, dessert-like experience that feels indulgent while being macro-friendly. It serves as a chameleon base. It can be sweet, mixed with berries and honey, or savory, used as a substitute for sour cream or mayonnaise. This versatility allows the athlete to reduce caloric intake from high-fat condiments without sacrificing texture. The viscosity of the product also triggers high satiety signals. The thickness of the yogurt stimulates mechanoreceptors in the mouth and stomach, signaling fullness faster than liquid calories or airy carbohydrates. However, not all Greek yogurts are created equal, and this is where the consumer must be a detective. As the trend exploded, major dairy conglomerates rushed to market with Greek-style yogurts. These imposters are not strained. Instead,
they are traditional watery yogurts thickened with cornstarch, pectin, or gelatin and fortified with milk protein concentrate to mimic the texture and macros of the authentic product. While they may hit the protein numbers, they often contain higher sugar loads and lack the clean ingredient profile of true strained yogurt. The investigative shopper must read the label. If it contains thickeners, it is a simulation. True Greek yogurt contains only milk and live active cultures. There is also a significant environmental shadow cast by this industry. acid whey. For every cup of Greek yogurt produced, there are 2 to 3 cups of acid whey waste. This liquid is acidic and depleted of protein, making it toxic to aquatic life if dumped into waterways. It depletes oxygen levels, killing fish. In the early days of the boom, this was a massive disposal crisis. Farmers were paid to take it as fertilizer, or it was treated in anaerobic digesters to produce electricity. Today, innovation is turning this waste into value. Food scientists are isolating the remaining lactose and acid whey for use in pharmaceuticals, or converting it into ingredients for protein bars. The industry is slowly closing the loop, but the environmental footprint of that 18 grams of protein remains a complex equation of inputs and outputs. Culturally, Greek yogurt represents the globalization of nutrition. It is an ancient food of the Mediterranean and Middle East. The word yogurt is derived from the Turkish yogurt, related to the verb yogurmak, meaning to knead or to curdle. For centuries, it was a staple of longevity diets in the blue zones. Its transplant into the gym bags of American bodybuilders signifies a shift away from processed diet foods, like the aspartame and fat-free yogurts of the 90s, toward whole, functional foods. It aligns with the clean eating movement that prioritizes minimal processing. Looking toward the horizon, the future of Greek yogurt lies in precision fermentation. We are entering an era where we can genetically modify the bacterial strains used in fermentation to produce specific bioactive peptides during the culturing process, peptides that could lower blood pressure, enhance sleep, or even further stimulate muscle protein synthesis. We are also seeing the rise of plant-based Greek yogurts that use almond, soy, or pea protein, fermented with the same cultures to mimic the texture, while currently trailing in protein density compared to dairy.
The gap is closing. For now, however, the cow-derived strained Greek yogurt remains the undisputed champion of the dairy aisle. It is the creamy, tart, slow-digesting guardian of muscle tissue, the perfect bookend to the day for the athlete who understands that recovery is a 24-hour job. It transforms the passive act of sleeping into an active period of growth.
7. Cottage cheese, the curdled sentinel of nocturnal anabolism. In the visual hierarchy of bodybuilding foods, cottage cheese has historically suffered from an image problem. It lacks the charred, primal appeal of a steak or the sleek, modern minimalism of a protein shake. It is lumpy, white, and wet, a texture that has divided the culinary world for generations. Yet to dismiss cottage cheese based on its aesthetics is to ignore one of the most potent biological tools available to the human physique. This is the ugly duckling of the dairy aisle that matures into a swan of hypertrophy. For the investigative researcher, cottage cheese represents a fascinating intersection of ancient preservation techniques and modern sports nutrition. It is the original slow-release protein supplement, a foodstuff that was engineering muscle tissue long before the invention of powdered casein. It is the tactical nutrition of the old school, the staple of the silver-era bodybuilders like Steve Reeves and Reg Park, who understood intuitively what science would later confirm, that this humble curd is the ultimate nocturnal guardian of muscle mass. The biochemical power of cottage cheese resides in its specific protein composition. While milk contains 2 primary proteins, whey and casein, the process of making cottage cheese effectively separates them, leaving a product that is roughly 80% to 90% casein. This distinction is critical. Whey is the hare, casein is the tortoise. When a bodybuilder consumes whey, amino acid levels in the blood spike rapidly and then crash, a dynamic ideal for immediate post-workout recovery. Casein, however, possesses a unique molecular structure known as a micelle. When these micelles enter the acidic environment of the human stomach, where the pH can be as low as 1.5 to 3.5, they do not dissolve, they coagulate. The casein proteins clump together to form a gel-like bolus. This biological clot is difficult for digestive enzymes to break down, requiring a slow mechanical erosion that takes hours. This phenomenon, known as gastric emptying rate, is the secret weapon of the cottage cheese consumer. By forming this clot, cottage cheese provides a steady intravenous-like drip of amino acids into the bloodstream for up to 7 hours after ingestion. In the physiological context of bodybuilding, this is the antidote to metabolism. During the 6 to 8 hours of sleep, the body enters a fasting state. Without circulating amino acids,
The body may begin to break down muscle tissue to harvest the nitrogen it needs for other vital functions, a nightmare scenario for the athlete seeking growth. Consuming a bowl of cottage cheese prior to bed creates a positive nitrogen balance that spans the duration of the night. It turns the passive act of sleeping into an active period of synthesis. It is the nutritional equivalent of keeping the factory lights on overnight. The production of cottage cheese is a delicate dance of acidification and temperature control, a process that has remained largely unchanged for centuries. It begins with skim milk, which is inoculated with a starter culture of lactic acid bacteria, typically Lactococcus lactis or leuconostoc. These bacteria consume the lactose, milk sugar, and convert it into lactic acid. As the acidity rises and the pH drops, the casein proteins lose their solubility and precipitate out of the liquid, forming solid curds. This is the break. The whey, the liquid remaining, is drained away. The master cheesemaker then cuts the curds into specific sizes, small curd or large curd. This is not merely a textural preference. The size of the curd dictates the moisture content and the mouthfeel. The curds are then cooked to firm them up, washed to remove residual acid, giving it a milder taste than yogurt, and finally dressed. The dressing is a mixture of cream and salt that is added back to the dry curds. This step is where the macronutrient profile is fine-tuned. A fat-free cottage cheese skips the cream. A 4% milk fat version adds it back in, creating a richer, more satiating product. The sodium content of cottage cheese is often cited as a drawback by the general health community, but for the hardcore gym goer, this perspective requires nuance. A single cup of cottage cheese can contain upwards of 800 milligrams of sodium. For a sedentary hypertensive individual, this is a warning sign. For an athlete sweating profusely and training with high intensity, sodium is a performance enhancer. Sodium is the primary electrolyte responsible for maintaining blood volume and fluid balance. It is also critical for the pump, the volumization of muscle cells during training. Sodium facilitates the transport of water and glucose into the muscle cell. A bodybuilder who is sodium depleted will look flat and perform weakly. The sodium in cottage cheese, therefore,
serves a dual purpose. It replenishes electrolytes lost through sweat and helps maintain the cellular hydration necessary for optimal contraction. Of course, during the final week of contest prep, when drying out is the goal, cottage cheese is often cut, but for the off-season building phase, the salt is a feature, not a bug. Culturally, cottage cheese has traversed a strange timeline. In the mid-20th century, it was the quintessential diet food, often plated alongside a canned peach half or a slice of pineapple on a bed of iceberg lettuce, the Nixon plate. It was the food of the housewife seeking to slim down, a symbol of culinary restriction. This stigma lingered for decades, causing a decline in popularity as yogurt ascended. However, we are currently witnessing a massive cultural renaissance of cottage cheese, driven by the social media generation and the high-protein hack movement. TikTok and Instagram have rebranded cottage cheese not as a diet punishment, but as a versatile high-protein base. We see it blended into pancake batters to add moisture and macros without the lumps. We see it frozen and whipped into high-protein ice cream. We see it melted into pasta sauces to create an Alfredo-like consistency with a fraction of the fat and 10 times the protein. This versatility has saved the industry. The modern lifter realizes that if they can get past the texture or blend it away, they have a cheap, low-calorie, high-protein superfood that can be sweet or savory. From a micronutrient perspective, cottage cheese is a powerhouse of calcium and phosphorus. These two minerals work in tandem to build bone density. This is often overlooked in bodybuilding, where the focus is entirely on the muscle belly. However, muscles attach to bones. As a lifter gets stronger, the torque and tension placed on the skeletal system increase exponentially. A 500-pound deadlift requires a skeletal structure capable of bearing that load. If the muscles outpace the bones, stress fractures and injuries occur. The high bioavailability of calcium in cottage cheese reinforces the skeletal chassis, ensuring it can handle the horsepower of the engine. Furthermore, cottage cheese is rich in riboflavin, vitamin B2, which plays a key role in the metabolic breakdown of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats to produce energy. The future of cottage cheese lies in the functional food sector. We are already seeing the emergence of probiotic-enhanced cottage cheese.
While the initial cooking of the curds kills the starter bacteria, brands are now adding live cultures back into the dressing, combining the high casein benefit with the gut health benefits of yogurt. There is also a push towards double cream or higher fat percentages, up to 6% or 8%, catering to the keto and carnivore crowds who prioritize fat for hormonal health. Conversely, we are seeing the development of lactose-free versions, using the enzyme lactase to break down the residual milk sugar, making this superfood accessible to the lactose-intolerant population that previously had to shun it. Cottage cheese is the silent workhorse. It does not have the flashy marketing of whey isolate. It does not have the exotic allure of Icelandic skyr, but it has the numbers. It has the history. It is the white noise of the diet, unobtrusive, reliable, and incredibly effective. It sits in the fridge of the serious athlete not as a snack, but as a strategy. It is the last thing they eat before the lights go out, the biological insurance policy that ensures that while the mind sleeps, the muscles are being fed, repaired, and prepared for the next day's war on the weights. 8. Lentils, the ancient nitrogen of the earth. In the carnivorous world of bodybuilding, where flesh and blood are the primary currencies of nutrition, the lentil exists as a quiet terrestrial revolution. It is the plant kingdom's most potent answer to the anabolic question. Often relegated to the side dishes of hippiedom or the soups of antiquity, the lentil is, in reality, a nutritional titan that challenges the meat-centric dogma of the gym. As we investigate the top 10, the lentil earns its place not just as a token plant source, but as a powerhouse of efficiency, sustainability, and metabolic utility. It is the seed of the legume family, a pulse that has fueled civilizations for 10,000 years, from the banks of the Euphrates to the bustling gyms of the 21st century. For the modern hybrid athlete, the lentil represents a shift towards clean energy, providing a massive protein payload accompanied by a complex matrix of fiber and slow-burning carbohydrates that animal products simply cannot replicate. To understand the lentil, one must first look at the soil. Biologically, the lentil plant, Lens culinaris, possesses a superpower, nitrogen fixation, through a symbiotic relationship with rhizobium bacteria and its root nodules.
The lentil plant pulls nitrogen gas from the atmosphere and converts it into ammonia, effectively fertilizing itself. This botanical alchemy results in a seed that is incredibly dense in protein. A single cup of cooked lentils provides approximately 18 grams of protein. While critics often point out that lentils are an incomplete protein, lacking sufficient amounts of the amino acids methionine and cysteine, this is a technicality that vanishes in the context context of a varied diet. When paired with a grain like rice or wheat, which are high in methionine but low in lysine, the lentil forms a complete protein profile that rivals beef. This protein complementing was once thought to require simultaneous consumption, but modern nutritional science confirms that as long as these sources are eaten within the same 24-hour window, the body's amino acid pool is sufficient to build muscle. But the value of the lentil extends far beyond its nitrogen content. It is the fiber profile that makes it a metabolic regulator of the highest order. Lentils are rich in both soluble and insoluble fiber. In the context of bodybuilding, this is crucial for insulin sensitivity. Insulin is the body's storage hormone. It shuttles nutrients into cells. However, when insulin spikes too high and too fast from simple sugars, it can lead to fat gain and insulin resistance. The complex carbohydrate matrix of the lentil, bound up in fiber, digests slowly. It creates a low glycemic release of glucose, providing a steady stream of energy for workouts without the crash. This slow-carb architecture makes lentils the perfect pre-workout meal for endurance lifting sessions. Furthermore, the fiber acts as a prebiotic, feeding the beneficial bacteria in the colon. A healthy gut microbiome produces short-chain fatty acids, SCFAs, like butyrate, which have been shown to reduce systemic inflammation, the enemy of recovery. Historically, the lentil has been the fuel of the working class and the warrior alike. It is one of the first crops domesticated in the Fertile Crescent. In the Bible, Esau famously sold his birthright to Jacob for a mess of pottage, a stew of red lentils, a testament to the irresistible hunger-crushing power of this pulse. In India, the lentil ball is the cornerstone of life, providing the primary protein source for over 1 billion people. For centuries, the West ignored this, viewing meat as the only real food. However,
the economic reality of the modern bodybuilder is shifting the narrative. Pound for pound, lentils are arguably the cheapest source of protein on the planet. In an era where steak and whey protein prices are inflating, the lentil remains recession-proof. A bag of dried lentils costs pennies and expands to triple its size when cooked. For the broke college lifter trying to hit 200 grams of protein a day, the lentil is the economic savior that makes the lifestyle sustainable. The presence of micronutrients in lentils is another layer of their efficacy. They are exceptionally high in folate, vitamin B9, and manganese, but the standout mineral is iron. Lentils are a significant source of non-heme iron. While non-heme iron is less absorbed than the heme iron in beef, its absorption is significantly boosted by the presence of vitamin C. Thus, the culinary tradition of squeezing lemon juice into lentil soup is not just for flavor. It is a biochemical hack that unlocks the iron, fueling red blood cell production and oxygen transport. This is vital for the gym goer, as iron deficiency leads to immediate drops in strength and stamina. The investigation must also address the anti-nutrient controversy. Lentils contain compounds like phytates and lectins, which can bind to minerals and reduce absorption. This has been a talking point of paleo and carnivore communities used to demonize legumes. However, a deep dive in food science reveals that these compounds are largely neutralized by proper preparation. Soaking dried lentils overnight and boiling them thoroughly degrades the lectins and reduces phytates significantly. Furthermore, recent research suggests that in moderate amounts, these so-called anti-nutrients may actually have anti-cancer and antioxidant properties. The bodybuilder need not fear the lentil, they need only respect the preparation process. Sprouting lentils, allowing them to germinate before eating, is another technique gaining traction. Sprouting activates enzymes that break down anti-nutrients and increase the bioavailability of vitamins, turning the seed into a living nutritional supplement. Culturally, we are witnessing the game changers effect. Following the release of documentaries and studies highlighting the performance benefits of plant-based diets, a new demographic of plant-based bodybuilders has emerged.
Athletes like Nimai Delgado and Kendrick Ferris have proven that massive hypertrophy is possible without animal slaughter. The lentil is the anchor of this movement. It provides the bulk, the chew, and a satiety that vegans often miss. We are seeing lentils processed into pasta shapes, offering a high-protein alternative to wheat noodles. We are seeing lentil flour used in baking. The lentil is shedding its dusty health food store image and entering the mainstream sports nutrition conversation. From a planetary perspective, the lentil is the food of the future. Beef production requires massive water inputs and generates methane. Lentils are drought-resistant and carbon-negative. They sink carbon into the soil. As the fitness industry grapples with its environmental footprint, the lentil offers a path to green gains. The ethical bodybuilder can consume lentils with a clear conscience, knowing that their quest for a larger chest is not expanding their carbon footprint. Looking forward, food technology is beginning to fractionate the lentil. We are seeing lentil protein isolate appearing in protein powders as a hypoallergenic alternative to soy and whey. These isolates strip away the fiber and carbs, leaving a 90% protein powder that is smooth and neutral in taste. We are also seeing the development of meat analogs, burgers and sausages, that use the texturized protein of the lentil to mimic the fibrous bite of muscle tissue. This is the next frontier, the ability to eat a burger that bleeds and tastes like beef, but is born from the soil-enriching lentil. The lentil is the grounding element of the top 10 list. It reminds the gym goer that strength does not always require blood. It offers a complex, slow-burning fuel that sustains the body through the grueling volume of a leg day. It cleans the gut, fills the muscle glycogen stores, and repairs the tissue with a robust amino acid profile. It is the ancient wisdom of the earth, packaged in a tiny lens-shaped seed, waiting to be unlocked by water and heat to fuel the modern machine.
In the gray pre-dawn light where the serious bodybuilder operates, there is a ritual that transcends geography and culture, the preparation of the morning oats. Entry number 9 in our investigative dossier is not merely a breakfast cereal, it is the primary carbohydrate anchor of the hypertrophy lifestyle. Oatmeal, specifically the whole grain derived from the Avena sativa plant, represents the gold standard of complex carbohydrates. In the metabolic equation of muscle building, protein is the brick, but carbohydrates are the labor force, the energy required to lay those bricks. Without adequate glycogen stores, the most protein-dense diet in the world is useless, as the body will cannibalize its own tissue for fuel. Oatmeal is the strategic solution to this energy crisis, a slow-burning anthracite coal that powers the human furnace through the most grueling leg days and high-volume training blocks. To understand the supremacy of oatmeal, one must descend into the molecular architecture of the oat groat. Unlike simple sugars or highly processed wheat products that flood the bloodstream with glucose, triggering a sharp spike in insulin followed by a debilitating crash, oatmeal possesses a complex starch structure protected by a formidable fiber matrix. This structure dictates its glycemic index, GI, a measure of how quickly a food raises blood sugar. Steel-cut or rolled oats sit low on this scale. When ingested, the body must enzymatically dismantle these long chains of glucose molecules, a process that yields a steady drip-fed supply of energy over several hours. For the gym goer, this is the holy grail of bioenergetics. It means that a bowl of oats consumed 2 hours prior to training will be peaking in energy delivery exactly when the athlete is under the bar, squatting double their body weight. It provides the sustained push required to finish the final reps of a set, where true growth stimulation occurs. The defining bioactive compound in oatmeal is beta-glucan. This soluble fiber is a gelatinous polysaccharide that forms a viscous gel in the gut. While the cardiovascular benefits of beta-glucan, specifically its ability to bind to cholesterol-rich bile acids and excrete them, are well documented in medical literature, its application to bodybuilding is more nuanced. This viscosity slows gastric emptying, significantly increasing satiety. In the cutting phase of a bodybuilding prep, where calories are restricted and hunger is a constant gnawing companion, the volume and density of oatmeal provide a psychological and physiological lifeline. A relatively small amount of dry oats expands significantly when cooked with water, filling the stomach and triggering mechanoreceptors that signal fullness to the brain. This allows the athlete to adhere to a caloric deficit without succumbing to the cravings that destroy contest prep. The history of the oat is a narrative of resilience, originating in the Fertile Crescent but thriving in the cool, wet climates of Northern Europe, particularly Scotland. The oat was historically the fuel of the warrior and the worker. Samuel Johnson, the 18th century English writer, famously disparaged the grain in his dictionary, defining oats as a grain which in England is generally given to horses, but in Scotland supports the people. The Scotsman's retort, "That is why England has such good horses and Scotland has such fine men," encapsulates the bodybuilder's philosophy. It is a coarse, rugged fuel for a rugged existence. It wasn't until the Industrial Revolution and the Quaker Milk Company's innovation of rolling oats for faster cooking that it became a global staple. Today, the gym goer has reclaimed this peasant food, elevating it to a precise instrument of performance. However, the investigation into oatmeal reveals a schism in the processing methods that the astute athlete must navigate. Not all oats are created equal. The hierarchy begins with the steel-cut oat, Irish oat, which is the whole groat chopped into pieces. This variety retains the highest integrity of the fiber matrix and the lowest glycemic impact. Next is the rolled or old-fashioned oat, which is steamed and flattened. This pre-digestion processing slightly raises the GI but maintains the nutritional profile. At the bottom is the instant oat, often loaded with sugar and pulverized so finely that it digests with the speed of white bread. The investigative researcher must warn the athlete, instant oats are a trap. They spike insulin at the wrong times and lack the sustained energy release of their coarser brethren. The serious lifter consumes rolled or steel cut, accepting the longer cooking time as an investment in metabolic stability. The cultural phenomenon of protein oats, deserves a specific deep dive.
This is the modern alchemical practice of mixing whey protein powder directly into cooked oatmeal. From a culinary perspective, it can be a textural nightmare if done incorrectly, resulting in a clumpy, chalky mess. But when executed with precision, stirring the powder in after the oats have cooled slightly, it creates a complete anabolic meal. It combines the slow-release carbs of the oat with the fast-absorbing amino acids of the whey. This synergy makes protein the ultimate pre-workout or breakfast meal, covering all bases of recovery and fueling. It transforms a low-protein grain into a macro-perfect sludge that has fueled millions of workouts worldwide. Furthermore, oats serve as a critical vehicle for micronutrients, specifically manganese, phosphorus, and magnesium. Magnesium is of particular interest to the investigative analyst. It is a cofactor in over 300 enzyme systems that regulate diverse biochemical reactions in the body, including protein synthesis, muscle and nerve function, and blood glucose control. Magnesium deficiency is rampant in athletes due to the loss of minerals through sweat. Oatmeal provides a robust natural source of this mineral, aiding in the prevention of muscle cramps and supporting deep restorative sleep if consumed later in the day. There is also a controversial frontier in the world of oats, the presence of glyphosate. As a crop often desiccated, dried out with herbicides prior to harvest, non-organic oats have frequently tested positive for trace levels of glyphosate in independent studies.
While regulatory bodies deem these levels safe, the clean eater mentality of the bodybuilding community often rejects any chemical interference. This has driven a massive market shift towards certified organic and glyphosate-free oats. The modern bodybuilder is not just looking at macros, they are looking at toxicology. They are willing to pay a premium to ensure that their carbohydrate source is free from endocrine-disrupting chemicals. Looking to the future, the oat is undergoing a renaissance in the form of overnight oats. This preparation method, soaking raw oats in milk or yogurt for 12 hours, changes the starch profile. It increases the amount of resistant starch, a type of carbohydrate that resists digestion in the small intestine and ferments in the large intestine. This fermentation produces short-chain fatty acids that improve gut health and insulin sensitivity. As the science of the microbiome advances,
We predict that fermented oats will become the next evolution in sports nutrition, optimizing the gut-muscle axis. Oatmeal is the humble giant. It lacks the sex appeal of a sizzling steak or the exoticism of quinoa. It is beige, mushy, and bland. But in its blandness lies its power. It is a blank canvas for flavor, a sponge for water, and a battery for the human machine. It represents the discipline of the morning routine, the first act of will in a day dedicated to physical improvement. For the gym goer, the bowl of oats is the ignition switch, the reliable spark that starts the engine of growth. If oatmeal is the morning ignition, brown rice is the diesel fuel that keeps the engine running throughout the day. It is the 10th and final entry in our investigation, the ubiquitous partner to the chicken breast, and the granular bedrock upon which the modern physique is constructed. In the iconography of bodybuilding, the Tupperware container filled with brown rice is as symbolic as the dumbbell itself. It signifies a life of preparation, of portion control, and of carbohydrate management. But why brown rice? Why has this specific grain maintained its hegemony over white rice, pasta, and potatoes for decades? The answer lies in a deep analysis of anatomy, insulin signaling, and the concept of micronutrient density. To understand the distinction of brown rice, one must perform an autopsy on the grain itself. All rice starts as brown rice. The grain consists of three components: the bran, the outer protective shell, the germ, the reproductive embryo, and the endosperm, the starchy inner core. White rice is the result of industrial milling that strips away the bran and the germ, leaving only the endosperm. Brown rice retains all three. The bran is the fortress of fiber, the germ is the vault of vitamins and healthy fats. By choosing brown rice, the bodybuilder is choosing to consume the living part of the plant, rather than just the sugar store. This results in a nutritional profile that is exponentially denser. We are talking about significantly higher levels of B vitamins, crucial for converting food into energy, magnesium, phosphorus, and selenium. The slow-carb philosophy we explored with oatmeal applies here with equal force, but with a different application. Brown rice is the ultimate lunch and dinner carbohydrate. Its complex fiber matrix ensures a slow,
steady release of glucose into the bloodstream. In the context of bulking, eating in a caloric surplus to gain muscle, insulin management is critical. Chronic spikes in insulin from simple carbs can lead to fat gain, even in active individuals. Brown rice mitigates this risk. It allows the athlete to consume massive amounts of carbohydrates necessary to replenish glycogen stores depleted by heavy training without triggering the lipogenic fat-storing signals associated with refined grains. It is the safe way to eat 300 plus grams of carbs a day. However, the investigative lens must focus on the anti-nutrient debate, a controversy that has recently caused a schism in the fitness community. The bran of the brown rice contains phytic acid, phytate. Phytic acid binds to minerals like zinc, iron, and calcium, potentially preventing their absorption. This has led proponents of the vertical diet, a popular performance diet, to advocate for white rice over brown, arguing that white rice is easier to digest and free of anti-nutrients. While technically true, the investigation reveals that the impact of phytic acid is often overstated in the context of a varied high-calorie diet. For a bodybuilder eating ample meat and vegetables, the mineral-binding effect of brown rice is negligible. Furthermore, phytic acid itself has been shown to have antioxidant and anti-cancer properties. The bodybuilder must weigh the pros and cons, the micronutrient density and sustained energy of brown rice versus the rapid digestion and ease of white rice. Many elite athletes utilize a hybrid approach: brown rice during the day for sustained energy, and white rice immediately post-workout for a rapid insulin spike to drive nutrients into the muscle. A darker chapter in the investigation of brown rice involves arsenic. Rice is a semi-aquatic plant, and it is uniquely efficient at absorbing arsenic from groundwater and soil. Because arsenic accumulates in the outer bran layer, brown rice contains significantly higher levels of this heavy metal than white rice. This is a legitimate concern for the bodybuilder who consumes rice multiple times a day, every day for years. Long-term arsenic exposure is linked to various health issues. The investigative researcher advises a tactical approach to sourcing. Rice grown in the southern United States, on former cotton fields treated with arsenic-based pesticides a century ago, tends to have higher levels. Rice grown in California,
India, basmati, or Thailand generally tests lower. Furthermore, the cooking method matters.
Cooking rice in a high water-to-grain ratio like pasta and draining the excess water can reduce arsenic levels by up to 50%, though this also leaches some vitamins. The informed athlete does not stop eating brown rice. They simply source it intelligently and prepare it strategically. From a culinary and psychological standpoint, brown rice offers a chew and a nutty flavor profile that white rice lacks. This texture is significant. It forces the eater to slow down, to masticate thoroughly, which aids in digestion and satiety. In the world of meal prep, brown rice is superior because it maintains its structural integrity better than white rice when reheated. A container of white rice can turn into a dry, sticky brick after 3 days in the fridge. Brown rice retains its individual grain structure, making the 4th day of eating out of Tupperware slightly less miserable. We must also explore the innovation of germinated or sprouted brown rice, or GBR. This is brown rice that has been soaked in warm water until the germ begins to sprout. This process is a game changer. It activates dormant enzymes in the rice that break down the phytic acid, neutralizing the anti-nutrient argument. More importantly, sprouting significantly increases the levels of gamma-aminobutyric acid, or GABA, an inhibitory neurotransmitter that promotes relaxation and growth hormone release. GBR is the super grain version of brown rice, offering the digestibility of white rice with the nutrient density of brown plus a neurochemical bonus. It is gaining traction in the high-performance community as the superior carbohydrate choice. The cultural impact of brown rice is tied to the clean eating movement of the 1970s and 80s. It was the counterculture response to the processed food boom. In bodybuilding, it became the badge of honor. To eat brown rice was to care about your body. To eat white rice was to be lazy. While science has nuanced this view, the stigma remains. Brown rice is viewed as work. It takes longer to cook, 45 minutes versus 15 minutes. It requires more chewing, and it tastes healthy. This effort is part of its appeal. It reinforces the identity of the bodybuilder as someone who does the hard things, even in the kitchen. Finally, we consider the role of brown rice in the global context of sustainability. Rice feeds the world, but brown rice,
requiring less processing energy than white rice, no milling and polishing steps, represents a more energy-efficient food source. For the ethical lifter, it is a way to maximize caloric intake while minimizing industrial processing. In conclusion, brown rice is the endurance athlete of the pantry. It is reliable, dense, and unpretentious. It provides the long-term energy substrates required to recover from yesterday's trauma and prepare for tomorrow's violence. It acts as the substrate for the protein, the bed upon which the chicken breast rests. It is the final entry in our top 10, not because it is flashy, but because it is fundamental. Along with the other 9 foods in this dossier, it forms the chemical arsenal of the modern gym goer, a list of ingredients that when combined with time, tension, and will, can transmute the human body into something extraordinary. This concludes the investigation. The blueprint is in your hands, the construction is up to you.